everyone, I'm Nasas.
I'm Enra.
And today we are discussing about a powerful React framework that transforming how we build web applications. As modern web development demands faster performance, better SEO, and seamless user experiences, Next.js has emerged as a go-to solution. So before we move into anything else, so let's get an answer for this question. What is Next.js? Vendra?
Thank you, Asas. So Next.js is a React framework for full stack web applications. So developers can use React components to build their user interfaces, while Next.js is offering some more additional features and optimization for the application. Also, with the new Next.js 15 update, now it is contained with new features such as support for React 19, ability to enable turbo pack in the local dev environment, and also they have improved the hydration error handling as well. So in this session, we are going to highlight how the Next.js is going to handle routing, rendering, server-side and client-side components, and what are the Next.js built-in optimizations, and how the application is going to be deployed in the Next.js.
So first let's talk about routing. When developing web application, routing plays a major role in defining how users navigate between different pages or sections. So in traditional React applications, setting up routes can be really complex. So because we have to use the tools like React Router. But in Next.js, routing is really simple and efficient because it has a file-based routing system. So which means the Next.js uses the strategy of convention over configurations. So when you're considering about Next.js routing, it has two methods. The first one is page router and the second one is the app router. So first, let's talk about the page router. So in page router, what we all have to do is just creating the pages with the names that the routes that we want inside the pages directory. So as an example, if you want to create a dashboard route, what we have to do is we have to just create a file with the name in here, in this example dashboard.tsx inside the pages directory. So as you can see, if you create a file like that inside the pages directory, you can get this route. So if you want to create nested route, as an example, if you want to create a reset password route inside the settings router, so what you have to do is you have to create a folder with the name of settings. Inside that folder, you can create reset password.tsx file, then you can get that nested router. So when we talking about the routing, another important thing is dynamic routing. So dynamic routing is a way to create pages that handle different URLs without creating a separate file for each one. So in page router, to handle the dynamic routing, they have introduced a special scenario. In here, as you can see, to do the dynamic routing, what we have to do is we have to create a file with the name with the parameter that you want within the square brackets. As an example, here the dynamic parameter value is ID. So you have to create that value inside the square bracket. So this file name is square bracket with the ID value dot the suitable extension. So like that, you can get these types of routes. As an example, so this is the dynamic route. So the another important thing in the page router is these page routes only support for client components. Actually, this is no built-in support for server components. So we will discuss about the client components and the server components later in this session. So now let's talk about how we access these dynamic routing values. So as an example, if we take the router post/10, so 10 is the dynamic value. So actually it can change to any value. To access this in Next.js, we use the use router hook from the next router. So on the other hand, the query parameters are also is an important thing that we are using in web applications. Actually, query parameters are extra piece of information that we use actually end of the URL. So I think you have seen that most of the times you will see after a question mark. So as an example in here, so if we take an URL like localhost 3000 port with the post question mark ID equal 10. In here, the ID equal 10 part is the query parameter. Here, ID is the key and 10 is the value. So to access these query parameters also in page router, we use router hook. So now we have an idea about the page router. So let's move into the app router. So there are some similarities and differences between the page router and the app router. So in the app router, what we are doing is we are creating folders instead of the files. So if you remember in the page router, all the files goes under the pages folder. But in here, we are creating all the folders inside the app directory. As you can see, if you can take an example, if you want to create a dashboard route, what you have to do is you have to create a folder name with the dashboard. In this example, you can see I have created the folder name with the dashboard inside the app directory. So inside that folder, you need to create a file called page.tsx. So from this, the Next.js knows, okay, then this is the dashboard route. So similarly goes with the nested routes. You have to create the settings folder. Inside that, you can create a reset passwords folder. Inside that, you can create the file with the name of page.tsx. So like that, you can create nested routes as well. So as we saw in the dynamic routing in the page router, if you're talking about the dynamic routing in the app router, what we have to do is we have to create folders instead of files. Like here, you can see I have created a folder with the square bracket with the value of ID. So like that, this dynamic router is available if we create a folder like this, and if we create a file inside that as page.tsx. So as you can, if you can remember, in the page router, all the components are default client components. But the important thing is app router is all the components default behavior supports to server components. Actually, it's enabling server-side rendering. So and another important thing is it actually supports for shared layouts. The thing is, if we create, if you in your web application, if you want to create custom layouts for different sections, what you have to do is you have to just create a layout file inside your section, then you can reuse it throughout your components. So similar to the page router, we can access the dynamic routing values and the query parameters in our application. In app router, to access the dynamic routing, we are using param props, and also we can use the use path name hook. Your component is client side, and to access the query params, we are using search param props, and also if you are using client side component, you can use search params hook. So since we have an idea about page router and the app router, so let's take an example how we code these things. So since it takes time to create Next projects, which means it takes time to download all the dependencies, we have already created two separate projects, one for app router and another one for page router. So you can simply create Next project using npx create next app command. So using those commands, we have created two separate projects. So initially, let's talk about the page router, how it works. As you can see in the page router project, there is a folder called pages. So all the routes should go under this folder. So as you can see, there is a dashboard file and the default index.js file. So this index.js file, if we click it, as you can see, Next.js page router. If you move on to the browser, in the port 3001, you can see the Next.js page router page is there. So similarly, if we want to create a dashboard route, I have already created that. Let's move on to that. /dashboard. Simply, the dashboard route is available. So in page router, what you have to simply do is go inside the pages router, then create a file with the name that you want to the router, then the route is available for you. So then next move on to the app router. So when it comes to app router, there aren't any file called pages, but there is a folder called app. So inside the app directory, you need to create the routes that you want. So as an example, if you want to create the dashboard router, what you need to do is you need to create the dashboard folder. Inside that, you need to create the page.tsx file. So from that, you can get the dashboard route. So let's move on to the port 3000, which means we created that for the app router. So /dashboard. So similarly to the page router, the app router dashboard is available like this. So it's really simple like that. So you don't need to do any additional configurations. So simply what you need to do is you need to create folders and the files. So let's talk about how to do the dynamic routing both in the app router and the page router. So let's first go to the page router. In the pages folder, you can see I have created a folder called posts. So this is a nested route. Inside that, I have created a file with the name id within the square bracket. So now you know within the square bracket means this is a dynamic router. So if I click that value, in this file I have defined to access that dynamic value. For that I have used use router hook. Using the use router hook, there is a query value dot the value that we are using. As an example, we have used id here, so we need to add the id value here as well. So let's move on to the page router on the browser. Page router, here the posts, I will set a random value 21 as the dynamic value. So the value is available here. So this actually can be any value, let's say 100. So you can access that value. So as I mentioned, this is a dynamic router which I created using the page routing, the Next.js. So similarly, next move on to the app router. In the app router also, inside the app directory, you can see the post folder is available. So instead of creating a file, what we are doing is we are creating folders inside the app route in the app router. So inside that folder, we need to create a page.tsx file. So we are not using use router hook in the app router. What we are doing is we default have params parameter. So this value, using this params value, we can access the dynamic values that we are passing through the URL. So here, this is the ID value. So as you can see, the folder name is ID within the square brackets. So if we take the ID value from params, we actually don't need to do like this as well. What we can do is we can type params.id, params.id as well. So if we move on to that, post 21, in the app route also we can access those values. So these things are really simple, so we don't need to do any additional configuration. So Next.js provides itself to access these values. So similarly, like we are accessing the dynamic values, dynamic routes, we can access the query parameters as well. So I'll show you how to do that. First, let's go to the page router. In the page router, under the pages folder, I have created a file named players. So let's move on to the browser. In the page router, I'll create players slash play id equal 10. So this is the query parameter, play id is the key, 10 is the value. So I have accessed that play id value here. Let's see how we access that value. In the page router, as I mentioned in the slides, to access the query parameters also, but we are using use router. Using the use router, we can use router.query. In the query, we have the play id value. We are accessing that, and we have that value here. So simply, let's move to the app router as well. Players, I can't play here. Sorry for that, and play id equal 10. So, but when it comes to app router, we are not accessing the same way. How we access the query parameters is a bit different. Let's go over to the players inside the page.tsx. In here, we are not going to use router. We are using search parameter. So in this parameter, we have the value that we want, the play ID, which means the value that we are passing. So like that, we can access that value here. So the value is there. So this is very simple. These are very simple ways to access these query parameters and dynamic parameter values. So hope you get a better understanding now how the page router and the app router works and how the dynamic routing and the query parameters works in the Next.js application.
Thank you, Asas. So let's move into the rendering of the Next.js. So there are two types of rendering that we need to highlight here. First one is the client-side rendering, and the second one is server-side rendering. In abstract, client-side rendering is using client or user's browser to render the web page, while the server-side rendering is server render the page and send it to the client side as a HTML-ready document. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the server-side and client-side rendering. Let's look at the client-side rendering first. As you can see in the image, first client-side makes the request to the server-side and the server-side sends the code to the client-side. But the response from the server is not ready to the render, but HTML has to be generated to make it visible to the client. So generating HTML part is handling inside the client. There are pros and cons in this client-side rendering. As for some pros, also some advantages, client-side rendering is good for the dynamic web pages. And also it is cost effective to the business, and is also ease of maintenance, and there are some other advantages as well. So as for the disadvantages or cons of the client-side rendering, this is not much of SEO friendly because the HTML web rendering part is happening on the client side, and it's not and the web crawling is not waiting for the entire page to be rendered, and it's not because of that it is not much SEO friendly. And the second one is client's device performance can be impact on the rendering process. As you can see, there are many variant of devices. Their performance is different to each other. So it can be a burden for the client because the client device performance is impacting on the rendering from the client side. And the last one is it might take a initial loading time, a large initial loading time, because when a user requests for the web page, it's generating the HTML code into the interactive web page in like it's the first time that loading the interactive web page in the client browser. Because of that, there's no cache or anything that supports through the HTML generation, so it takes longer initial loading time. Now let's move into the server-side rendering. So in here, client requests a web page from the server. Unlike the client-side rendering, once the request received from the server side, instead of sending the HTML code, server-side HTML generation part and send the ready HTML to the client side. Now the only thing left is make the HTML interactive. That's where comes the hydration, where the phase of static HTML page take to alive by attaching event handlers. In here, there are many pros as well as the cons. If you talk about pros, this is SEO friendly because the HTML ready documents is already received to the client, and all the client's browser has to do is attaching the event handlers. Because of that, the web crawler is already there and page is already rendered, and because of that, this is SEO friendly. And also there's faster loading because server side already sent the generated HTML to the client side, and this is ideal for static web page where the dynamic pages is not suitable for the server side rendering, and this is for ideal for static web pages. As for the cons, this is not much cost effective as compared to the client side because the server takes the burden of the rendering HTML web pages. And also this can be cause a higher server load when the application is big. As you know, when the users are there are many users and the application also big, there are many requests, so there can be higher server load when the application is big. So that is about the server side and client side rendering. Now let's talk about what are the server side and client side rendering, client side components when it comes to Next.js.
Yes. So since we have an idea about server-side and client-side rendering, so let's have an idea about server-side and client-side components. So when we are talking about server-side components, actually these server components are introduced from Next 13. So previously, Next 13, there was no server-side components. All the components are by default client components. So the major difference between the server-side components and the client-side components are the server components runs on the server and client components runs in the browser. So when you're talking about server component doesn't handle interactivity. As an example, if you press a button or if you fill a form, those types of activities are not supported in the server components. But when it comes to client component, you can handle the interactivity of your web application using these client components. So if you consider about the file size, in server component has smaller file size because it's actually not being sent to the browser. It works on the server. But when it comes to client component, you have large file size because it sends the file to the browser. So when it comes to the server side and client side component, so basically while server components are greater for optimizing performance and keeping your bundles light, and client components give you the flexibility and add dynamic and interactive features for your website. So these are the advantages. There are some pros and cons according to a requirement. You need to decide what type of components that you need to use. And also, so after the next 13, still you can use the client components inside your project. To do that, you can use the use client directive. So if as I mentioned earlier, so all the component that you are creating in your next project after the next 13, by default it's a server component, but if you want to convert that to a client component, what you have to do is you have to use client directive on the top of your component. So that is the basic idea about actually the server and the client component. So since we have an idea about the server and client component, so let's talk about the server rendering strategies. So Next.js offers 3 types of server rendering strategies, each for different scenarios. So those 3 types are static rendering, dynamic rendering, and streaming. So static rendering is in static rendering, what it does is HTML pages are pre-rendered at the build time. So this is actually ideal for the use cases like blog pages or the documentation, actually where the content doesn't change very often. As an example, so if you are going to a documentation, the content doesn't actually change very often. So in the situations like that, static rendering is suitable. But in the dynamic rendering, what actually it does is all the routes are generated at the request time for each user. So this approach is very useful when the data required for the router is only available at the time of the request. So another important thing is, like, if a dynamic function means, like as an example, if we take a dynamic function like the cookies, so if if a function like that is detected inside your component, the entire route automatically switch to the dynamic rendering in Next.js. So the third server rendering strategy is streaming. So in streaming, this actually allows the UI to load in paths by sending chunks of the data to the client. So this actually it's like dividing your component to small chunks and it sends it to the client. And also this makes the application feel faster and improving the user experience, because the UI loads in separate paths, not at a once. So when the data is available, a part of the UI is ready for the user to view. So like that, these are the 3 types of server rendering strategies that available in the Next.js. So next move on to another important part in the Next.js, which is middleware. So in middleware, in Next.js, the middleware is a powerful feature that allows us to control requests before they reach to our application. So in middleware, you can handle tasks such as redirecting URLs and also modifying requests, and also you can even respond directly to a request using middleware. Actually, middleware is commonly used for tasks like authentication and authorization, handling server-side redirects, and also implementing logging and analytics tasks. Actually, middleware adds a flexible layer of control, making it easier to handle advanced application workflows. So because of these things, middleware plays an important role in Next.js applications.
Let's take a quick rewind of the journey that we took so far. So we have learned what is rendering, what is routing, what is the server side, what are the server side and client side components, and what are the middlewares. So from here now on, we are going to talk about the features and the deployment process of the Next.js. So let's take a look at it. at the built-in optimization of the Next.js. First, let's talk about the image optimization. Almost every page serves some kind of image. Even it can be a background image, it can be just an image showing in their web page, even it can be a favicon. So because of that, image account for a huge portion of the typical website page weight. The Almond website have conducted a survey about image loading impact on the web page. They have conducted a survey on 2021 about the median website, and they have identified that on mobile, the total weights in the median website of 2021 is 2019 kilobytes, and from those 2019 kilobytes, 881 of those kilobytes were images. As you can see, almost half of the total page weight is taken by the image source. So because of that, image loading is very important. And also, according to them, the vast majority of pages, 70% on mobile and 80% of the desktop, is most impactful resource is an image. Because of these findings, it implies how much images can impact on the web page and the importance of optimizing it properly. So in terms of image optimization, what are the things that Next.js has to offer? First one is size optimization. It's basically what it does is based on demand, it resizes the image using modern image formats like WebP and AVIF. And the next one is visual stability. It's basically preventing the layout shifts automatically when images are loading. And the next one is faster page loads. So when it comes to image loading, what Next.js has optimized is images are only loaded when they are enter the viewport of the user, because unless there's no point of loading the image. So they have used the native browser lazy loading method in here. So the last one is asset flexibility. This is on-demand image resizing. Okay. Let's move into a hands-on experience on how the image optimization that provided by the Next.js can use into action. As you can see here, we are using the Next/image component provided by the Next.js, and we are using image path here as also the width and height as well. Let's go into the web page first. This is the image that we are using. Let us show you a network tab. As you can see here, this is the image that we are loading here. As you can see, it is 34 kilobytes, and this is more than 130 kilobytes of an actual image. And right now we are using the Next.js offered built-in optimization for the image, and as you can see, it is 34 kilobytes. Now let's talk about the traditional way of showing an image without using the Next.js optimizations. As you can see here, this is the not optimized way that we used before. This is the image tag that provided by the HTML, and as you can see here, the next image, that the same image that we used before, it is now 142 kilobytes. Now you got an understanding about why the image optimization is really important to a web page. Without the image optimization, the large content of the image, that as you can see, the 142 kilobytes that reduced to 34 kilobytes with the Next.js optimizations. So without that, it is the web page is loading 142 kilobyte of image. So that is about the image optimization. Let's move on to the font optimizations.
Yeah, so similar to the image optimization, Next.js provide font optimization solutions as well. So when we use fonts from external font providers, so as an example, we are using Google Fonts. So it requires network tickets to fetch the font files from their server. So by self-hosting fonts, actually the Next.js removes these additional external requests, enhancing the privacy by ensuring that no data is sent to the third-party services. So what Next.js does is, during the build process, Next.js fetches all the font files and stores them locally. So these fonts are treated as like any other static asset, and meaning they are served quickly without needing to be fetched from an external server when the user visits the site. So as an example, when we are using the external font, obviously we have to send a request. From using the font optimization, we don't need to do that, because during the build process, Next.js fetches all the font and keep it as a static asset. So from this way, Next.js has provided the font optimization to your web application. So let's go through a code example how we are using the fonts in the Next.js application. So as you can see, in here we are using the font roboter from the Google font roboter from the Next font Google. So what we have to do is we just have to create a constant with the roboter font, and we have defined the weight value as the 400, and we have set the subset to Latin. And also in simply what we have to do is, inside the main tag we can use this roboter.class name to apply the font styles to the entire application. So like that, this is very simple mechanism. We don't need to do additional configurations or stuff to do the font optimization. So simply in these types of we can do the additional changes as well if we want to do, like if we adjust the weight and if we adjust the size, we can do those things in here as well. So from these things we can customize the fonts as we want, and also it gives the optimizations to our web application. So next, let's move on to the script optimization. So script optimization in Next.js is a feature that helps to improve the website performance by managing how and when scripts are loaded on a web page. So this is especially useful for third-party scripts, like the scripts that we are using for the analytics and also the tracking scripts. Actually, those scripts slow down a web page if we not handle properly. So when it comes to strategies that we can use for the script optimization in your web application, Next.js providing 4 types of major strategies to do the script optimization. The first one is before interactive, and the second one is after interactive, third one is lazy loading, and the fourth one is worker. So before interactive method is, it loads the script before any Next.js code and before any page hydration occurs. So in after interactive method, it is the default way, and it loads the script early, but after some hydration on the page occurs actually. So when it comes to lazy on load, it loads the script later during the browser idle time. So worker, which means the last one, it loads the script in a web worker. So we can use these 4 strategies. So it's very simple. We just have to add these strategies according to our requirement. So from these ways, from these strategies, we can actually do the script optimization according to the requirement in our web application.
Yeah, so there are many built-in optimization in the Next.js, but let's talk about these things first in very briefly. So first one is metadata. So metadata is basically important for SEO, and Next.js automatically generates the head element for you when we configure the metadata. And also when it comes to Next.js, metadata can be configured in two ways. One is config-based metadata, and the second one is file-based metadata. So when it comes to config-based metadata, it's simply it means export a static metadata object or a dynamic function. When it comes to file-based metadata, it's simply adding an static or dynamic files, special files to the route. The next optimization that we are going to talk about is optimizing package bundling. So as you know, basically when if you take about one project for example, there can be many third-party libraries. So in this year, what Next.js offers is optimizing the external library that we have put in our project. So the bundle size is reduced. So basically we can use the optimize package imports option in the next config. So it will load the package where only it's necessary. So the next one is lazy loading optimization. So basically what the lazy loading is, it's improve the first time loading of an application. So allowing that the client components, libraries and other necessary imports include in the client bundle only when needed. So it's basically using the dynamic import of Next.js or React Lazy. So actually we can use dynamic import of that provided by the Next.js or use React Lazy with suspense to achieve the lazy loading. But anyway, both of them behave same because the dynamic import of the Next.js basically use the React Lazy with suspense in underneath. So basically both of options behave exact same way. The next thing is analytics. So when it's come to an web application, the analytics played a crucial part because without analytics, so the business won't get to know how many users reach, how is the user interaction works on the web page. So the analytics plays a major role in here. So there are built-in support for analytics in the Next.js using Web Vitals. So you can measure FCP, LCP, FID, and etc. because of Web Vitals provide more measurement units and measurement methods to you. So the next one is instrumentation. So instrumentation is a process of using code integrated monitoring and logging tools into your application. So basically, when it comes to monitoring and logging, it plays an important part because if there's an error, it can be an API error, it can be an input error. So in this way, we will be able to find out what and where it went wrong with the logging. And so also, it's worth mentioning, Next.js provide inbuilt support for OpenTelemetry, which is a logging tool, and it can be used in here as well. So the last one is memory usage. So basically, a typical web application can use your memory very much, but Next.js provide two methods. One is to reduce the memory usage, one is for track memory usage. So the first one is to reduce the max memory usage, we can use Webpack memory optimization that provided by the Next.js. The second one is debug memory usage. It shows the information about memory usage continuously through the build. So we can find out where the maximum memory is used and what we can do to improvise it. So let's talk about the integrated third-party libraries next. So now we have done the built-in optimization. This is the third-party libraries that are going to integrate and embedded with the Next.js in the future. These libraries are under active development, and these are experimental. Even though these are available for now, but still these are in experimental libraries. So Next.js was able to integrate Google third-party libraries such as Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, Google Maps, and YouTube embedded libraries. So in the future, developers will be able to use these libraries that provided by the Next.js instead of new library just for this particular scenario. So these are the third-party libraries that that will be integrated in the future with the Next.js. So now, since all the optimization and the third-party libraries are done, now it's time to ship the production.
So now let's move on to an essential part of any web development workflow, which is deployment. So when you execute the next build command, actually it compiles your application into optimized production version. So this process generates HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML are pre-rendered pages for faster loading, and also CSS or style sheet are generated and optimized, and also JavaScript bundles for each page, ensuring efficient code split and performance. So additionally, when you are considering the Next.js, it uses its own compiler. Actually, it is 17 times faster than Babel. It minimizes the browser bundles, and actually it leads to faster load times and smooth user experience. So if you are considering the types that we can do the deployment in Next.js, there are two major types. The first one is with Vercel. It's an efficient way, and also you can do the self-hosting as well.
Yeah, when it comes to deployment with Vercel, so as you already know, Vercel is the creator and the maintainer of Next.js. So because of that, it provides managed infrastructure and a developer experience platform for specifically for Next.js application. As a native platform for Next.js, Vercel is designed to enhance the overall developer experience. And also, when it comes to deploying to Vercel, it's basically a zero configuration, and it offers additional benefits including scalability, high availability, and performance enhancement as well. So the next one is the self-hosting. So self-hosting, basically instead of using Vercel, we are hosting on our own server, so that it gives a better control over our application. So there are basically it can be three main ways to achieve self-hosting. So the first one is a Node.js server. It can be a Docker container, and the last one is static export. So when it comes to static export, it is which is perfect for generating purely static site. It can be for example, it can be a blog post site, it can be a document. So it doesn't change very much often. It's a static site. So even though deployment can be two ways with Vercel and with self-hosting, no matter what deployment method you choose, and Next.js ensure that all features are fully supported for your setup. Thank you, everyone. This is the end of our session. If you have any questions, comments, please follow the below link, and we will get back to you. Thank you.